The silence in a house at 3 a.m. isn't peaceful. It's heavy. It presses against your eardrums like water. I woke up with my heart hammering against my ribs, a cold sweat making my nightgown cling to my skin. My husband, David, wasn't in bed. The sheets on his side were cool to the touch. "David," I whispered, my voice swallowed by the dark room. He had been restless for weeks, pacing the halls, checking his phone at odd hours, snapping at me over the smallest things. He blamed it on the stress of running his construction company. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the man I'd been married to for 6 years was just tired, not dangerous. But instincts are a funny thing. They wake you up before your brain even knows why. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. Since we adopted our rescue cat, Luna, I had gotten into the habit of checking the indoor security cameras whenever I heard a bump in the night. My finger hovered over the app icon, but in my groggy state I tapped the wrong one. The screen flared to life, bright and jarring in the darkness. It wasn't the living room feed. It was the dashcam app for my new SUV, the white Range Rover I had bought just 3 days ago. The image on the screen was crisp, illuminated by the harsh yellow glow of the garage work lights. And what I saw made my blood turn into ice water. David was there. He was lying on a creeper dolly underneath the chassis of my car. He wasn't wearing his pajamas. He was wearing gray sweatpants, a dark hoodie, and thick rubber gloves. A small tactical flashlight was clenched between his teeth, casting a jagged beam of light onto the undercarriage. In his right hand, he held a pair of heavy-duty steel wire cutters. He wasn't fumbling. He wasn't checking the oil. He was precise. I watched in paralyzed horror as he reached up, positioned the cutters around a thin metal line, and squeezed. Nap. A few drops of dark fluid dripped onto the concrete. He moved a few inches to the left. Nap. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle the scream that was clawing its way up my throat. Tears blurred my vision, hot and stinging. The man who had kissed me goodnight 3 hours ago, the man who had promised to love and cherish me, was systematically destroying the one thing that kept me alive on the road. Then his phone, which was lying on the concrete floor next to his head, lit up. He took the flashlight out of his mouth and answered it on speakerphone so he could keep working. "Yeah," he said. His voice was calm. "Come." A woman's voice filled the garage speakers. It was sweet, breathy, and laced with a terrifying casualness. "Honey, are you almost done? The baby is kicking again and I'm so tired. That $5 million has to belong to him, David. We can't wait anymore." David laughed, a soft, chilling sound. "Relax, Lena. I'm cutting the rear lines right now. The fronts are already done. Tomorrow, Julia is driving through the Blue Ridge Mountains to see her parents. One sharp turn, one steep drop. And it will all be over. Once she's gone, the inheritance is mine by default. You and our boy will be living in this house by Christmas." The phone slipped from my trembling fingers onto the duvet. $5 million. Secret son. A mistress named Lena. The man I married wasn't just a cheater. He was an executioner. My name is Julia Reynolds. Until that night, I thought I was living a fairy tale. I was a financial analyst in Richmond, Virginia. Steady, organized, boring in the best way. David liked that about me. He called me his anchor. 3 weeks ago, my life changed overnight. My Aunt Helen, a recluse who had made a fortune in early tech investments, passed away in Zurich. She had no children, no husband. I was her only living relative. She left me everything. $5 million tax-free. When the wire transfer hit my account, David had hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. "This is it, Jules," he had whispered into my hair. "This is our fresh start." I didn't know then that his construction business was drowning in debt. I didn't know he owed money to loan sharks who didn't accept late fees. I didn't know about Lena. I just thought he was happy for us. But the next day the pressure started. "Why don't we put it in a joint account?" he asked over dinner. "Why don't we invest it in the company?" I had hesitated. "I want to keep it separate for now, David. Just until I talk to a financial planner." It's a lot of money. That hesitation signed my death warrant. I didn't sleep again that night. I lay in the dark, my body shaking so violently that my teeth chattered. I wanted to run. I wanted to grab my keys and flee. But where would I go? If I left, he would know I knew. And if he was willing to kill me for the money, he wouldn't hesitate to chase me down. So I did the only thing I could do. I became the analyst. I saved the dashcam footage to my phone. I emailed a copy to a secure cloud account I used for sensitive client files. I saved another copy to a micro USB drive and hid it inside a tampon applicator in the bathroom cabinet, the one place a man like David would never look. When the sun finally rose, painting the room in a cruel, cheerful gold, I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The woman looking back at me in the mirror was pale, with dark circles under her eyes. But she wasn't a victim. She was a witness. David came back to bed at 5 a.m., smelling of soap and mouthwash. He slid under the covers and draped an arm over my waist. "Sleep tight," he whispered. I lay rigid, counting his breaths, waiting for the alarm. At 7 a.m. we were in the kitchen. The smell of coffee was nauseating. David was sitting at the island, reading the news on his tablet, looking for all the world like a loving husband. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said, smiling as I walked in. I picked up fresh bagels. "You need your energy for the drive. The mountains can be tricky this time of year." I poured myself a cup of coffee, gripping the mug with both hands to hide the tremors. "You're so thoughtful," I said, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears. "Did you check the car yesterday?" I heard a weird noise when I parked it. For a split second, his eyes flickered. A micro-expression of panic. Then the mask was back. "Of course I did. I checked the tires, the oil, everything. It's brand new, Jules. It's a tank. You're perfectly safe." If the word hung in the air like poison gas. "You should get going soon," he added, glancing at the clock. "You want to beat the traffic." He wasn't worried about traffic. He was worried about timing. I was reaching for my purse, my mind racing with excuses to delay the trip, when the doorbell rang. The sound was sharp, insistent. David frowned. "Who the hell is that?" He walked to the door and opened it. Standing there, chewing gum and looking impatient, was his sister, Brooke. Beside her was her boyfriend, Kyle, a guy who wore leather jackets in July and always smelled like stale cigarettes. "Brooke?" David asked, confused. "What are you doing here?" Brooke pushed past him into the foyer. "We need a car, Dave. My piece of junk finally died, and Kyle promised the guys we'd go up to the cabin for the weekend. We need to borrow the new SUV." My heart stopped. The cabin was in the mountains. The same route I was supposed to take. The same steep, winding roads with 1,000-foot drops. David went pale. "What? Well, absolutely not. Julia needs it." Brooke rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. Julia isn't even dressed yet. Plus, she has that inheritance money now. She can rent a limo if she wants. Don't be stingy." Margaret Reynolds, David's mother, walked out of the kitchen where she had been tidying up, snooping. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and nodded at Brooke. "Let her take it, David. Just a car. Family helps family." David looked at me, panic pouring off him in waves. He was trapped. If he said no, he'd have to explain why the car was dangerous. If he said yes, he was sending his own sister to her death. I don't think it's a good idea," David stammered. "The handling is tricky. It's a big car." "I can drive a big car, David." Brooke snapped. "God, why are you being such a jerk? It's just for the day." Margaret glared at me. "Julia, tell your husband to stop being ridiculous. Let Brooke take the car." I looked at David. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was weighing the options. If he let Brooke take the car, she might crash. But if he stopped her, his plan was ruined, and he might expose himself. He was a gambler and he just decided to roll the dice. He looked at me, pleading silently for me to be the bad guy. "Say no." I reached into my purse. My fingers brushed against the cool metal of the key fob. I thought about the conversation in the garage. One sharp turn and she's gone. I thought about Lena. I thought about the 3 a.m. betrayal. I pulled the keys out and set them on the granite counter. Clink. Fine, I said softly. Take it. Just be careful on those curves, Brooke. Brooke snatched the keys with a triumphant grin. Finally. Thanks, Jules. See ya. David reached out a hand as if to stop them, but it fell back to his side. He watched, mute and terrified, as his sister and her boyfriend walked out the door toward the garage. The sound of the SUV's engine roaring to life in the driveway was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Then the tires crunched on the gravel, and they were gone. The house fell into a suffocating silence. David couldn't sit down. He paced the living room floor, wearing a track into the expensive Persian rug. He checked his watch every 30 seconds. He wiped sweat from his forehead, even though the AC was blasting. You okay, David? I asked, peeling an apple with a small knife, my movements slow and deliberate. I'm fine, he snapped. Just work stuff. A headache. You seem worried about Brooke, I pressed. She's a good driver. I know, he yelled, then lowered his voice. I know. I just hate those mountain roads. We waited. 1 hour. 2 hours. The clock on the wall ticked like a countdown. At 11:42 a.m., David's phone rang. It wasn't a contact name. It was a local area code from the Mountain District. David stared at the phone as if it were a bomb. His hand shook violently as he swiped to answer. Hello. I watched the color drain from his face until he looked like a corpse. His knees buckled and he sank onto the sofa. No, he whispered. Are you sure? Are you? Is there any chance? He listened for another 10 seconds, then dropped the phone. Clattered to the floor. Margaret rushed in from the kitchen. David. Who was that? What's wrong? David looked up at her, his eyes hollow. It's Brooke. The brakes. The brakes failed on the pass. They went over the guardrail. Margaret screamed, a primal shattering sound that echoed through the entire house. No. My baby. No. I picked up David's phone from the floor. The line was dead. I looked at my husband. Was it supposed to be me, David? I whispered. He flinched. He didn't answer. But his eyes screamed yes. The next 3 days were a blur of police reports and funeral arrangements. The police ruled it a tragic mechanical failure. Manufacturer defect, they called it. David played the grieving brother perfectly in public, but at home he was a ghost. He wouldn't look at me. He spent hours locked in his office, whispering into his phone. The funeral was held on a gray, rainy Tuesday. The church was packed. Margaret was inconsolable, draped over the casket, wailing about how unfair life was. David stood beside her, looking stoic and tragic in his black suit. I stood a few feet away, clutching my purse. Inside that purse was the USB drive. And my phone. As the service ended, Margaret turned her rage onto me. You! She shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at my chest. This is your fault. You gave her that death trap. You knew something was wrong with it, didn't you? You killed my daughter. The church went silent. Hundreds of eyes turned to me. David stepped forward, putting a hand on his mother's shoulder. Mom, stop. It was an accident. She didn't want Brooke to have it. Margaret yelled. She hesitated. She knew. I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was time. I didn't want her to take it, Margaret, I said, my voice clear and steady. Because David told me not to drive it. David froze. Julia, don't do this here. Why, David? I asked, stepping closer. Why don't we tell your mother the truth? Why don't we tell her about Lena? The color left his face. Shut up, he hissed. Pulled out my phone. I had connected it to the church's Bluetooth audio system earlier that morning, under the guise of providing a playlist for the wake. Press play. David's voice boomed through the church speakers, loud and distorted but unmistakable. Relax, Lena. I'm cutting the rear lines right now. Tomorrow Julia is driving through the mountains. One sharp turn. And it will all be over. Once she's gone, the inheritance is mine. You and our boy will be living in this house. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavier than the casket. Margaret stopped crying. She looked at the speakers, then slowly turned her head toward her son. Her face wasn't sad anymore. It was horrified. David, she whispered. What was that? David backed away, holding his hands up. Mom, it's fake. She edited it. She's crazy. Is the video fake too? Yes. I held up the USB drive. I have the video of you under the car, David. The police have it too. I sent it to them an hour ago. The flashing lights of the police cruisers reflected off the stained glass windows. They didn't wait for the reception. They arrested David right there in the church aisle, in front of his mother, in front of his business partners, in front of God. As they handcuffed him, he didn't look at me with anger. He looked at me with shock. He had underestimated me. He thought I was just a checkbook. He forgot I was an analyst. I notice patterns. I notice anomalies. Margaret collapsed into a pew, sobbing. Not for Brooke this time, but for the realization that her golden boy was a monster who had sacrificed his own sister in a botched attempt to kill his wife. Trial was short. The video evidence was irrefutable. The recording was damning. And then there was Lena. The police found her quickly. She turned state's witness in exchange for immunity. She told the jury everything. The debt, the plan, the baby that David was desperate to fund with my dead aunt's money. David was sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder and manslaughter. I didn't stay in Richmond. I sold the house. I sold the furniture. I sold everything that had his fingerprint on it. I took my $5 million and moved to the coast of Maine. I bought a small cottage overlooking the ocean. Far away from mountains, far away from winding roads. I started a consultancy firm for women in financial distress. I teach them how to protect their assets. I teach them how to spot the signs of financial abuse. Sometimes late at night I still check my security cameras. Old habits die hard. But now when I look at the screen, I don't see a man with wire cutters. I see an empty driveway. See peace. And I remember the lesson that saved my life. When your gut tells you something is wrong at 3 a.m., listen to it. Don't go back to sleep. Because the monsters aren't under the bed. Sometimes they're sleeping right next to you.